Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Carlo Perusa MMA. I am Carlo Perusa, and today I'm with Mr. Mikey Strangles. He is Mr. Mike Sanford, ahead of his Gamebred FC contest. He's making his return to some bare-knuckle MMA action, taking on David Zelner. Made his debut in Gamebred last year in Biloxi, Mississippi, looking to run it back here. Mike, first off, how are you doing, man? You're going to be fighting here in about 4 or 5 weeks, man. What is it like at this point in training camp? What is everything like? What is it all about?
Yeah, it's great. I'm excited. Right now. I'm trying to take my. I got a weight cut ahead of me, so I actually just fought last weekend in the gloves, and I did that to kind of like kickstart getting myself in shape because I tend to be a little bit slow starter with that. Owning a couple of businesses makes it difficult at times to put aside time for my own hard training. So I did a fight last weekend. I got down to about a weight class up for that one. I did a lightweight fight, and then I'm going down to featherweight. We're actually doing a cash at 150 this time, so I'm on my way there after last weekend. As far as the weight cut goes, right now I'm kind of honing in on my conditioning, trying to add a few things to my game, trying to mix it up a little bit so I'm not predictable, and training hard with obviously Jason, Brandon, Tyler. They've all got big fights too. Brandon's fighting for the world title, so we're all putting some work in together, kind of take each other to the next level.
No, you've been at this for a very long time, both competing as well as coaching. I mean, some big UFC names. How did you get yourself in this crazy world of combat sports?
Man, it's kind of funny. I I don't know. I guess I grew up in a combat sports family. I was always attracted to it, but like my grandfather was a boxer, and my mom didn't like it. She didn't want me to get into it, but I was always attracted to it. And eventually my family kind of talked her into it. But in 1995, my aunt competed in the first women's Golden Gloves for New York, my mom's sister, and I got to travel with her and train with her for that. And she ended up winning her way to the finals, which was at Madison Square Garden. And then I remember, getting to go backstage Madison Square Garden and kind of see her win that title there and become one of the first women to win the Golden Gloves in New York State at Madison Square Garden. It was kind of impactful for me at 10 years old. So I think seeing that happen when I was like 9 or 10 years old had an impact on like me maybe wanting to do something like that one day. I did that for a while. Did a little bit of boxing and wrestling coming up, but I wasn't really introduced into MMA until I was an adult. I'd already been out of high school, and I was at a boxing gym actually. And some guy that owned a martial arts school that had a cage in it, they were like running underground MMA fights, like amateur smoker kind of style stuff. But they would like go to the boxing gyms and these other gyms that had athletes, and they would try to get them in to fight their traditional martial arts guys. And that was the first time I saw like real MMA, like people with submissions on the ground, win by submission. I never really saw that before. So then after that, everyone told me about the UFC and Hoist Gracie, and I worked at Hollywood Video, so I found all the videotapes there, and I watched all these VHSs and DVDs, and that was my introduction to it. So I actually fought before I even knew really what MMA was all about as an amateur.
So many people watch mixed martial arts in this day and age, and there's so many new fans that watch it. But I think very few realize, man, 15, 20 years ago, this was the wild, wild west, man. It was not nearly as culturally accepted. Jason Knight tells me stories when he first started fighting. He would fight at something called the Fight Club, or he'd fight in a dog kennel and stuff
Yep.
against random drunk people. When you first started getting into this, do you have any crazy stories of mystery opponents, crazy fighting conditions? Have you seen it all?
Man, I've seen quite a bit. Jason's stories are a hell of a lot crazier than mine. He was 14 years old and he was doing that stuff too. And he came into the gym here. He already had like probably 4 or 5 fights, and was undefeated at like 14. And then he started actually training. Before that he was kind of like self-trained. His brother, just made him tough basically, and he was still winning fights. But then as he came up, I think Alan made him wait until he was like 16 to do a fight with us, and he won another few amateur fights, then went pro at 17. So he's got a crazy story. Alan started fighting really young too. I didn't get into it that young. I got into combat sports, but I was never really a competitor. I never liked competing. I've always had more of a strategic approach. And I like the strategic aspect of it. I like the planning aspect of it. So I got into coaching really early. I moved into a jiu-jitsu gym shortly after doing those first couple introductory fights I did, and I started training jiu-jitsu full time. I competed a little bit in that too, But I mostly just got into this coaching role really early. Like I was like 19 years old, 20 years old when I started coaching pretty seriously. And I just kind of always stuck with that role. That's why I never went pro. I did a few amateur fights here and there just for improvement and to, I knew it would make me get better. And, if it was something was going to come easy to me, I was attracted by the money in mixed martial arts for sure. But I just found that like I could do everything I wanted to do by coaching and teaching. And I got plenty of competition experience through my guys. Like, I get more nervous when Jason fights than when I fight, and he says the same thing about me. It's funny, but I get all that I need out of martial arts from that aspect of it. So I never really had that need to go pro or that desire to go pro until about a year ago. Once I saw Gamebred come out with the bare-knuckle MMA, that attracted me because I never had an opportunity to do that. That was illegal whenever I started. And I always, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, wow, this is something I could really get into. Less equipment, less gloves, less rules, more creative freedom. And to me, that's the thing. Like, it's an art, right? We're martial artists. And when I have all these rules and restrictions in place and all this, like, you have to use this paintbrush, like, that's going to take the art away from it for a lot of artists, right? I like the least amount of equipment possible and the least amount of rules possible for the maximum creative expression. And so when I saw Gamebred come out with bare knuckle MMA and get that legalized, that's when I'm like, all right, well, that I want to do. Let me get a couple fights in. So if an opportunity opens up, I can jump in there. And that was kind of one of the main reasons I started fighting last year. 38 years old.
I think when a lot of people see bare knuckle MMA, they instantly think knockouts. This is vicious. This favors the striker. I'm the total opposite here. I think it favors guys like you. I think it favors jiu-jitsu. Obviously, when you're practicing jiu-jitsu, you're not doing that with gloves. It's natural. You went in there, your first contest, you're able to pick up a submission victory. Do you feel it makes the jiu-jitsu, does it make the ground game so much easier without the gloves?
Absolutely, 100%. It's definitely the gloves, and this is a definitely common misconception. Gloves only favor strikers. Not only that, they only favor, honestly, if I'm being real here, less technical strikers because you don't have to be as careful when you got gloves and wraps on. You don't feel the punches. You don't feel what's happening, and this is why, honestly, we see more hand breaks, like actual fractures, in boxing than we do in bare knuckle boxing. Same thing with MMA. We see more fractures when there's gloves and wraps on than we do without them. And it's not because, it's less safe or whatever. It's just because these guys can get away with throwing so much harder and so much more recklessly, and they don't feel the impact. So that you're more likely to have a damaging impact when you're doing something wrong over and over again. You don't realize it. You just keep doing it, right? And then eventually it's going to cost you. In bare knuckle fighting, when you punch the wrong way or the wrong spot, you immediately feel it, like it hurts. And you get that pain response where, all right, well, now I got to be more careful. I got to pick a different spot. I got to hit that a little bit differently next time. And this is why we see less actual fractures and serious injuries, except with brand new guys when they get a little reckless. It can still happen for sure. Anytime you're throwing your fist at something, you can break your hands. But if you look at the statistics, it's much less common in bare knuckle fighting than it is in gloved and wrapped fighting. And one thing I've always done, I've never fought with wraps. I don't like wraps. I don't even wear wraps when I train. Like I don't preach that too much in my classes because I'm afraid of liability. If somebody gets hurt, they're gonna blame me. There's a place for it. When you first start, if your hands are weak and they're underdeveloped, yeah, you should definitely wrap them up and support them because they're weak and underdeveloped. Same thing if you're injured. But to me, it's bandages. You're putting bandages on. It's literally a crutch. If you walk around with crutches your whole life with healthy legs, your legs are gonna be weak. I think you need to develop these things the right way. And, it's not saying that you can't get injured, but I think that people are getting more injured more often because they're using these crutches all the time when they don't need them. They should be developing their strength, in my opinion.
Last year in Biloxi, you made your debut against Alex Gordy. If I remember correctly, I think it was a last-minute opponent change, like the week before the fight for you. You're able to go in there, home building. You had 5 or 6 guys that you trained fighting on the card. You're able to kick off the night right, first round submission victory. What was that moment like for you, Mikey?
Man, it was really awesome. I actually that wasn't even the last week replacement. That was the same fight day replacement. So my opponent apparently he got arrested on weigh-in day and nobody could find him. So he fell off, and then they gave me 5 names because they still really want to be on the card. So the Gamebred did a phenomenal job. They gave me 5 names of guys that were willing to fight me on one day's notice, apparently. And I went through the list. I picked every single one of them, and they said they wanted to fight me, but apparently only one guy was really serious because he was the last guy I picked. It was the kid Alex I ended up fighting. He wrestled in college. He was a kickboxing instructor. He was a southpaw. Like he was exactly the opposite of everything I had trained for. So he was kind of my last choice. He was a 6-0 amateur. He was making his pro debut, but he was 6-0 as an amateur. He just won a title like a few weeks before. Didn't take any damage. He was in great shape. So it was a big difference in the opponent that I was preparing for. But he was the only one that was game. So I ended up fighting him on one day's notice. Hats off to him, man. I was super happy that he was serious about it. Because I started getting a little concerned after like the third and fourth guy said no. After I accepted it, I was thinking, oh man, they didn't want to have a fight after all. Yeah, Gordy stepped in there on one day's notice, and he busted my face up pretty good. I think he ended up breaking his hand. He was throwing a little bit reckless in that single leg, but I took some damage from that.
After that victory, you went right back into work. I mean, you had guys. You had Tyler Hill going, I think 2 fights after. You had Brandon Davis going. You had Chase Sherman going. You had Jason Knight going. Obviously, you had Belcher going in the main event. Was that kind of a weird dynamic for you, finishing fighting, then be like, oh, God, I got work to do now?
Yeah, it sure was, man. I had to get stitches in the back, so I was getting stitched when Tyler fought, so I wasn't even out in time for him. I did end up cornering most of the rest of the guys, and Alan in the main event, and it was a cool experience. I was dripping blood all over my shirt and trying to yell at the same time. My mouth was a little swollen, my nose was completely shut. So it was definitely an interesting experience, but it was good for me. Like I was, going through some things, mental health wise, and it was really healthy for me to have that distraction of having to be there for those guys and not have to think about my problems at that time. So I got a lot out of that. I got a lot of great experience out of that too. Being able to do that all in one day, that's something probably not a lot of other people have done. And I think it gives me I think it's like a unique feather in my cap to have done that. I think that was really cool.
So there's a lot of guys coming out of Mississippi. Obviously, you're involved with, a lot of the big ones. Obviously, the Shermans, the Hills, the Belchers, the Knights, Brandon Davis. What is it about Mississippi? What is it about the people who live there in combat sports? What makes it just go crazy in that area of the United States?
I think, we've got a lot of tough country kids around here, man. And these guys, they grow up, they're attracted to combat and rough sports. And, a lot of the guys around here, they legitimately enjoy fighting. Like, I mean, whether it's with their friends in their backyard or whatever else. And there's just a culture of that in the South where like fighting is a part of growing up, and I think a lot of the country kind of lost that in a lot of ways. We don't see that as much everywhere else anymore. Fighting is like more of a violent, horrible thing. And it's, one of these things where people feel like they have to be mad or whatever else. And combat sports aren't like that. And when you grow up in a culture where like fighting isn't about being mad, I think it's a little bit easier to get into combat sports where you are fighting. And it's just my observation from the outside, because I've taught in a few states. I taught in New York and Florida and some other areas. But one thing I noticed is that when it comes to like switching from like grappling to actual fighting, or from fighting to grappling, or from striking to grappling, guys have a hard time. Like their ego gets in the way of it. Like to them, it's like something they have to win. It's about violence and about winning and dominance and all these things. Where I've noticed like around here in Mississippi, like these guys say they want to fight and they just love to fight. And it's kind of cool that there's that little bit of a culture. It's like almost like a subculture around here. So there's a lot of tough kids, and I think we'll see more and more. But they enjoy the fighting culture, and because of that, they're able to transition into combat sports world really easily. Not just one aspect of it. Where like in some areas they'll get into boxing or they'll get into jiu-jitsu. Around here, they just want to do all fighting, and I think it's great. It suits what I like to teach.
When you first got involved with mixed martial arts, did you ever envision one day it would be as big and culturally accepted as it is right now?
Yeah, I kind of did, and I'm surprised I took this long for bare-knuckle to come back, because I think, I think that there's a little bit of maybe some changes that can be made to the way that it's marketed. I think that martial arts is something that people find fascinating, and but so is violence. And I think right now, like a lot of the bare knuckle stuff is being sold on the violence and the blood aspect of it, and I guess that does sell a lot. And a lot of people definitely want to see that, especially when they're getting drunk and yelling at a TV. But to me, it's the martial arts aspect of it, the creative aspect of it, the strategic aspect of it, the tactics that are used that makes it so beautiful. And when there's less equipment getting in the way of what the athletes are able to do, I think it's even more beautiful. So I'm not surprised that MMA has caught on so much because I think it's the ultimate sport. I mean, if we think about it, this is the original sport, the ultimate form of competition. It's me versus you. It's a one-on-one sport with the least amount of rules possible, just to keep us from maiming each other, right? Like we don't want to poke each other's eyes out. This is intra-species combat. If we look in nature, every species in nature has some form of intra-species combat that is non-fatal. You know, piranha got these crazy teeth, right? When they fight, piranha fight over territory and fight over females. Guess what? They don't bite each other. They like whack their butts together and wrestle. You know, venomous snakes, same thing. If we look at cottonmouths and rattlesnakes, they don't bite each other, right? They would kill each other. Especially like, you know, talk about cottonmouths, their venom is designed to kill other reptiles, you know? They would easily kill each other. Instead, they wrestle, right? It's an interspecies form of combat that is as old as competition itself. And humans, we ball our fists up and we hit each other with them until somebody goes unconscious. Then we feel like we won, right? We wrestle too. So we do a little bit more as far as that goes. You know, they say that the human hand evolved to make a fist. You know, something that we do that other primates can't do. No other primate can make a fist and hit with it, you know? So I believe that this is the oldest form of sports and the oldest form of competition. And I think that there's an immense appeal to most people. As much as we don't like to promote violence in our culture, modern day, I think that there is a innate attraction to it. Just, you know, I think it's just like people like competition and like winning and losing. They like to see winners. They like to see something on the line. I think this is the purest form of that. So I'm not surprised it's gotten big, and I'll be surprised if it doesn't get a lot bigger.
You know, in addition to the sport just blowing up, one thing that we're seeing is the talent overall from the last 15, 20 years is a lot greater now. I mean, you're seeing absolute killers. You're seeing guys going into the UFC at 25, 26. They got 10 to 15 pro fights under their belt. You know, I asked Jorge Masvidal one time, what was the reason for this? And he said, you know, kids now, so culture accepted, kids are starting to choose jiu-jitsu at 10 years old. By the time that they're 18, 19, they might have 5 or 6 amateur contests. They got 5 or 6 pro contests by the time they're 23, 24. As a coach, as someone who, you know, helps people try to get in these situations, can you attest to that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Masvidal is exactly right. You know, the guy's brilliant. He's one of the unsung minds in MMA, in my opinion. But I think really what it is, especially with like the wrestling culture, you know, America, especially in the US, America has got folk style wrestling. And to me, that is the ultimate base martial art. When you combine that with some jiu-jitsu and some striking, you got killers like right off the bat. And for the longest time, the culture in wrestling was that we have to go to the Olympics. I want to be an Olympic gold medalist. And that's every wrestler's dream from the second they go to high school. They want to get a college scholarship and become a lawyer or whatever the hell they want to be, and or they want to go to the Olympics, right? That's their goals when they start wrestling. But now that there's money in the UFC, we're starting to see those goals shift a little bit. And a lot of these kids, like Bo Nickel, who probably could have gone to the Olympics and became a lawyer and done all that stuff, well, he's saying, well, shoot, I'm just going to make even more money and keep doing wrestling in the UFC. And I think we're seeing more and more of that because of the money that's available now. People are planning for that future the way they used to plan to go to the Olympics, or they used to plan to just go into some kind of collegiate field, you know, after getting a scholarship to a good college. So I think this has become a new career path choice for a lot of the young martial artists in the country.
You know, you mentioned Jorge Masvidal, definitely be one of those amazing MMA minds, but I think another one that does not get the credit he deserves is Alan Belcher. I mean, what that man has done for his career, what he has done for the people around him has been absolutely unbelievable. You know, he was done from the UFC. He came back, he explored the bare-knuckle world, reinvented himself, had the opportunity to become the first ever double bare-knuckle champ. What has it been like, one, be able to get really close to that guy, call that guy a friend, get to train that guy, train him? What's it been like knowing Alan?
Man, Alan's he's great. He's one of those guys, like he is an action taker, you know. So Alan and I, we think a lot alike, and we're very much on the same wavelength, you know. I've been partners with Alan. Well, first off, Alan hired me to become a head coach out here in like 2010. Then he asked me to be the manager of his gym. He got his eye surgery. He wasn't sure if he was going to keep fighting back then. So we kind of started this thing here, like where it started to really blow up around that time, and we worked together a lot. And one thing I've noticed about Alan is when he puts his mind to something, he makes it happen, and that's something that sets him apart from a lot of other smart people. A lot of smart people come up with good ideas, but they just put it off. They don't do anything. That's, you know, I'm guilty of that myself a lot. And if it wasn't for Alan, I wouldn't have done half the stuff that I've done. You know, Alan's a very inspirational action taker. So not only does he come up with great ideas and implement things, but he's not afraid to make adjustments. He's not afraid to make changes when something he's doing isn't working. He's not afraid to admit when he's wrong and grow. And then on top of that, he's not afraid to take action and risk it, and that's what's kind of set him apart from a lot of people. The guy's he had a great career in the UFC, and then now he's having a great career in the bare knuckle world. He's becoming like the bare knuckle guy. He's setting himself up in a position where he could be, a double champ soon. And I'm not going to be surprised when that happens. He's already gotten the one world title in BKFC. He came a little short against JDS, but I mean JDS is one of the greatest of all time, and he showed that he is capable of winning that fight, in my opinion. So I think Alan's really motivated and excited, and I think that a lot of the fans are too, to maybe see that happen again after Alan works his way back into a rematch.
Do you guys ever give him hell about the Johnny Cash tattoo?
Well, it's kind of beat to death, it's been done to death. He's got it improved over the years, and Alan, man, he's one of those guys, like, that stuff doesn't bother him at all. Like, if anything, he feels bad for the guy that did the tattoo. He's one of those guys. Like, stuff kind of rolls off Alan for the most part. It's hard to get under his skin. You got to work real hard to do that.
All right, moving forward, let's talk about the upcoming contest. So you're going back at it, Biloxi Coast Coliseum, November 15th. You make your second appearance to the Gamebred cage, taking on David Zelner this time, a guy with quite a bit of MMA experience, has some professional contests under his belt. Overall, what do you think of him as an opponent?
I'm really excited. He's definitely the toughest guy I've ever fought. I've been scheduled to fight guys at this level before, but it's always fallen through. But I think the way Gamebred does it, knowing Zellner's background, having seen his fights, I know he's game. I know he's going to show up. I know he's going to be there unless something really goes wrong. So that makes me excited, and it makes it a little easier for me to like really hone in and start training hard. Motivation has always been a big problem for me. I'm one of the laziest people in the world by nature. That's why I was never really a competitor. I've always coached, and I would set up the game plans. I'd help map things out. But when it comes to like doing the hard work myself, a lot of times I would, just do what I had to do, the minimum, right? Now that I'm the athlete competing, I have to set my game up, start training just as hard as these guys, just keep up with Brandon Davis. God help me, that guy's really hard to keep up with. But having them around me makes it a lot easier, and having an opponent that I know is game, that I know is there to fight the full fight as hard as he can and never quit, that makes it a lot easier for me to put that extra work in, So I have a ton of respect for Zelner. He's got a great ground game. I've watched him fight. He's really slick on the ground. He's got good stand up. He's not afraid to throw and bang. He's not afraid to get hit and come forward after he gets hurt. So I know this is going to be a real fight. It's going to be the toughest test I've had in the cage.
Being able to fight another guy who's also high level at jiu-jitsu, do you get excitement of that, being able to test yourself?
Yeah, definitely. And not only jiu-jitsu, but an MMA fighter with good jiu-jitsu. To me, I consider myself more of a ground fighter than a jiu-jitsu guy. And there's some differences between like competition jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu for fighting, major differences. And it's something I've talked to a lot of the jiu-jitsu tournaments about, and improving jiu-jitsu with the rule set and scoring. I think AGF's doing the best job right now, and they're making the most improvements. But I look at ground fighting as a separate art from jiu-jitsu in a lot of ways. And again, what I do for my jiu-jitsu, I combine it with a lot of folk style wrestling, and of course, my submission game is always improving, and then of course the ground and pound makes a bit of a difference too.
So you get to kick off the night again this time. You have 4 guys on the card, obviously. Tyler, Knight, Chase, Brandon Davis, obviously they're in the main event. One thing that really stuck out to me, Jason Knight mentioned, when you're fighting with all these teammates, he's like, it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, last time he was against Randy Costa, it was the co-main event. He's like, if I go out there and they all won, I'm going to be relaxed. But if I go out there and some of my guys are losing, that might go against me. Being able to do this first, do you like that? Do you take some favor in that?
Yeah, I do. I like being able to go first, get out of the way, because then I can get stitched up or iced up if I need to, and then I can be there for the guys that need me to be there for them. But I don't think that like thinking about that is the right mentality. Like I almost don't want Jason even to watch me fight, because it'll pump him up if I go out there and kick some ass. But if something goes wrong, I don't want that. I don't want me to be the reason that he's not at 100%. And that's something that me and him have talked about quite a bit. I think that it's very important to hone in on what you can control and not even pay attention to anything you can't control. Like before that fight, he shouldn't even know the results of these other fights, you know? Even though it is going to help him maybe if it's good results or whatever, and it should be, but I don't want that to be a factor. You know, I want that to be a non-factor. I want Jason to go out there and be at his best no matter what happens that night. And that's something that, you know, we've talked about a little bit. And that's a big thing. It's taken me a long time to learn. You know, I used to have a lot of competition anxiety when I was younger. For any competition I did, I just didn't like it. You know, I didn't like doing it. I was always worried about what people were going to think. What if I didn't perform well? You know, I get mad at myself. I don't get that much joy out of winning, to be honest. A lot of guys, they say, oh man, winning's the best feeling ever. Losing's the worst feeling, but the winning makes it worth it. You know, for me, I never got that. When I win, I just feel like relieved, you know, like, oh great, nothing went terribly wrong this time, you know? So like, I've never been like that type of a competitor. But what I do enjoy is getting better. I enjoy learning. I enjoy being able to test myself and test my theories and put my strategy to work. So that fact has always been what kept me wanting to do something. But you know, again, I get that out of coaching too. So my whole night's really like my competition is like all the strategies we put together for each one of these fights. Every one of them is going to feel like I'm fighting. You know, to me.
You know, I've been following this promotion from the get-go, and this card is just amazing, man. I mean, every single card, they're getting bigger and bigger. They're getting more traction. More people are watching it. But I think in terms of depth, I mean, this card is unbelievable. I think there's 15 or 16 former UFC guys on it. Everyone is basically a name here. How excited are you to, you know, be able to be on a card with all these killers?
I'm thrilled. You know, I'm really happy that I was able to get on here. You know, I told Dean too that this is something I really want to be a part of. You know, I'd actually gotten a call earlier this year to do Dana White Contender Series and, you know, some other stuff. I had a possibility for PFL. It just really doesn't interest me, man. Like I honestly don't really want to fight in the gloves. So I mean, I'll do it, but to me, fighting in the gloves, and this is another thing when it comes to my motivation. I feel like I'm training, you know, like it's really hard for me to snap into fight mode the way I really felt myself snap in that bare knuckle fight. And you know, it's like training where I can lose, you know, in front of people. You know, it doesn't have as much of a payoff to me. So I'll do it, and I think training is good. I like fighting the gloves, you know, and I like being able to get paid to get out there and do something. Um, if I'm really going to take it serious, if I'm going to fight high level opponents, I want it to be in Gamebred. You know, that's what I'm interested in. So I think the fact that I'm able to be on this card with all these guys, it's really awesome. I feel blessed.
You know, while all the fights on this card are pretty amazing, that main event, man, is amazing. I mean, Costa, Davis, we get to see a rematch. We get to see two guys that are really doing their thing here in Gamebred. Both guys, I really think, can be faces of the organization. Obviously, an inaugural title is up for grabs. Overall, man, you've been obviously with Brandon. How important is this fight for all of you guys?
Oh, it's super important. You know, so Brandon and I are pretty much the main coaches here. You know, we take on the coaching roles for all the important fights where he'll be the head of like stand up and I'll be like the head of the ground game. And Brandon's a brilliant tactician. You know, the kid's got great strategic mind, brilliant strategy. He doesn't always show his fight IQ in the game because he just loves fighting so much. Like he'll get out there and be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fight stupid because I just, you know, I love fighting this way." Like he'll just get out there and agree not to take a guy down sometimes in the middle of the fight and not care about like he just wants to go out there and have fun and showcase his skill set and throw down sometimes, you know. And that's just what he loves to do. That's who he is, and you know that's part of what makes him such an exciting fighter too. But as far as like you know game planning and strategy goes, he's brilliant. You know, even though he doesn't always show it in his fights, he comes up with brilliant game plans all the time, and he really knows how to break down opponents, break down strategies. He's got a phenomenal eye for fighting in general. And I mean, honestly, I've worked with a lot of great striking coaches. I've been blessed to meet some of the best striking coaches in the world, and the way Brandon's explained certain things to me just made it click for me so much easier than any other striking coach I've ever worked with personally. You know, so it's great to see him develop as an athlete and finally get that world title that I always felt that he was good enough to get, and I always thought he would get a shot at. I'm glad that that's finally happening and he can finally get that. But also, I think he's going to be a phenomenal coach whenever he decides to retire and really put time into that. You know, he's already done a lot as a coach, but I think that he's only scratched the surface of what he's capable of.
You know, before every single event, I try to pick fight of the night. And this one, for this one, I mean, this is a challenge. This is not easy to do that. I think the main event is going to be amazing, but there's one fight that I can't get over, and that's Jason Knight versus Josh Williams. Two guys who do not know how to go backwards, who could only go forward. Obviously, Knight is known for some of the most epic bare-knuckle UFC MMA fights. I mean, that guy was literally born to do this. If he was put on earth by God, it was to fight. You know, Josh Williams is a guy with a similar style, man. Are you guys getting ready for an absolute barn burner there?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I'm with you on that, man. I think I ran into Josh Williams. He was at my fight last weekend, and I told him, man, I'm looking forward to your fight. I got the best seat in the house, and as a fan, I'm glad to be ringside for that one. I'm gonna be there for Jason, of course. I believe Jason's gonna take the win, but I expect that to be a very very fun fight. I remember when Jason fought Artem Lobov the first time. Jason did a lot of things he should not have done in that fight. And as a coach, I was very frustrated at times. But as a fan, it was probably the best fight I've ever seen in person. I've seen thousands of fights in person. That was the best one I've ever seen. And at the end of the fight, when they were announcing the winner, I didn't even care who won. Like, how crazy is that? I'm in this, this is Jason. He's my guy. Like, I forgot that they had to announce a winner. Like that's never happened to me before. So sometimes when Jason fights, it's just so exciting and so fun. It kind of makes me forget what I'm there for, and I could definitely see this fight being like that.
I think when you talk about greatest bare knuckle fight ever, it's got to be Lobov versus Knight one. In my opinion, that is
Yeah,
the greatest ever. Is it
it was
cool for
amazing.
you that happened in Biloxi, that happened in Mississippi?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in all honesty, like Jason had to kind of sell me on that. Like I wasn't down for it. I wasn't into it. I didn't really know. I wasn't really into the bare knuckle boxing thing. I didn't like the rules that much. I didn't think it was going to be good for his career. I was thinking about all the damage he would take and the scar tissue, and but Jason really wanted to do it. He kind of sold me on it. And then I started talking to David Feldman, and he was talking about different opponents. And I'm like, oh well, if you can get Artem Lobov, that could be really fun. So we negotiated it together. He ended up fighting Lobov, and then Lobov went on and beat Paulie Malignaggi, to turn into a big rematch, and it was super cool. So like that kind of that fight night, that event changed my whole opinion on bare knuckle boxing. Like I became a bare knuckle boxing fan after that night, whereas before I was a little bit standoffish with the idea. I wanted bare knuckle MMA for sure, but bare knuckle boxing just didn't have that appeal to me until after I saw those fights that night.
20 years ago, what would have you said if someone said that there'd be organized bare knuckle competition and you'd be fighting in it?
Oh, I would be like, well, I hope so. I mean, but you got to think too. Like bare knuckle boxing was the original professional sport. So we want to think about when we talk about professional sports and professional athletes. Who was the first professional athlete to make a living off their sport in the world? It was John L. Sullivan, and that era of bare knuckle boxers were the first professional athletes in sports. And then that developed into professional boxing with gloves, which became bigger. Bare knuckle boxing kind of died away because it was a little bit too brutal, too many cuts and whatever else, had a bad image. And then boxing became the biggest sport in the world. It was the first professional sport, and everybody watched it and everyone loved it. So I'm not surprised it's made a comeback. I'm definitely not surprised that I wouldn't be involved in the bare knuckle MMA aspect of it. So I would be like, well, I'm glad to know that that's going to happen. So I could definitely see myself doing this at any point. So yeah.
Is it safe to say that Mississippi is the home of bare knuckle fighting?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, back to John L. Sullivan, the first big fight where the athletes got paid well happened right here in Mississippi. It was for the American title, the Police Gazette American title. It was when I think it was Patty O'Brien fought John L. Sullivan. It happened right up the road here, right in Gulfport. It's going to be maybe 5 minutes from where the Coliseum is, where we're fighting next month. So yeah, I would say Mississippi's definitely home. And the Kilrain fight for the world title happened in North Mississippi. So I think Mississippi's kind of been the hub for bare knuckle fighting since the beginning of time, almost.
Do you think Gamebred has the opportunity to get extremely big? I mean, they're doing bigger and bigger every show, but does this really have a good chance to really take off?
Yeah, I definitely think so. 100%. I'm honestly surprised it's not bigger already. I'm surprised there's not copycat organizations that are trying to piggyback off of it already. I have no doubt it's going to get bigger because it's definitely what people want. I'm surprised bare knuckle boxing got so big. To be honest, I thought bare knuckle MMA would get big quicker, but I will not be the least bit surprised when it gets bigger than bare knuckle boxing, which I'm sure it eventually will. Just like MMA got bigger than boxing overall, over the years. I think it's just a matter of time. Hopefully, not too much time. I'm getting old, so we'll see how many I got left in me.
All right, Mike, last question for you, my friend. In a perfect world, what is the outcome when you take on David Zelner November 15th at Gamebred FC 8?
Well, Zelner's a tough cat, man. He's got good submission defense. He's comfortable on the ground. He's comfortable in uncomfortable positions. I'm thinking that I'm gonna have to most of my actually all of my wins that I've ever had, amateur and pro, have all been in the first round. I think Zellner's going to be my first guy that I'm not going to be able to beat in the first round. So I think um, I'm probably gonna take this later round submission, maybe second or third round. I think I'll get a submission. Hard to say what's gonna be open there. He's got good well-rounded game. He's got good defense. Most of my submissions come from back mount. I do look for back mount quite a bit. Him knowing that, he's probably not going to make it easy for me to get there. I'll say that I'll probably get some kind of a submission in the second or third round. But I'm not sure if it's going to be a rear naked choke or a guillotine choke. It could be a number of different options depending on what he's trained his game to do to negate mine. I know I've got a lot of footage out there, and in most of my fights, you can see my A game, what I like to do the most, and I'm sure he's going to be very well prepared for that. So I'm going to have to probably go to my B game and C game and hit him with my backup plans, which is what I expect to happen.
Well, Mike, I can't wait to see you fight, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I love talking about how you got into this, the whole history. I mean, it's going to be an amazing night, and I'll see you in Biloxi, Mississippi, my friend.
All right, you too, man. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for us tonight. That is Mikey Strangles Sanford. I'm Carlo Peruzza. Stick around, fight fans.